So the topic what we are discussing today is understanding business cycles. Bhargav, did we finish this? Did we touch this topic?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So let's finish this off. So wind up this one. What is a business cycle? See, cycle. You know cycle, right? Cycle here is like something which starts at some point and exactly comes and ends up at the same point. That is a cycle. So when it ends up at the same point, then there is a, then if you don't, change your ways or means of dealing with certain product or certain business, then what would happen? You may not excel. The point is, let's say this is Maruti Suzuki, which has bought up a model of one of its hatchback. Okay, let's say the hatchback is like uh, let's say some hatchback they have already they have been running in the market. Now let's say Maruti 800. This Maruti 800 was launched way years back when I was also in 1990s. This car was the most saleable car in India because it really satisfied the Indian customers, and it really was up to the mark for the Indian conditions. Okay, do you think that Maruti 800 was they launched in 90s, they can continue today also? Can they continue today also with the same specifications, with the same design, with the same model, or they have to change with the changing times? They have to change with the changing times. That's what. So car started, the car was made, okay, and the car was going through different phases in its different phases during its life cycle. And again there was one point whereby there was a saturation scene, and that point people started buying less of Maruti 800 because of lot of reasons, lot of competitors in the market, or product was not up to the mark as per the modern times. Okay, and product was not giving that satisfaction what other kind of cars were giving to the same kind of customers who were looking forward to buy a hatchback, etc. There can be many reasons, or maybe there can be a recession in the market where people were buying less of this. So you want to drive the customers towards yourself, so you have to come out with a complete new platform. Maruti 800 has undergone lot of changes maybe during this cycle period. Changes in the sense like with some kind of additional features added up in a year or two, or with some kind of facelift versions coming. But one fine day would come whereby the entire platform has to change. So for example, if you take Samsung models, okay, when they launched the Samsung models, after 1 or 2 years they completely changed the model and completely came out with new version, new software, etc. If they don't do that, they may not they may like end up there and then. That means to excel again they have to change this cycle and bring the product into a new cycle. That is very important. So this was the introduction regarding this business cycle. Now let us see the different phases in the business cycle. So business cycle is characterized by, business is nothing but where you are involving yourself and employing your resources to generate some profits. Certain activities you are performing, and also you are putting your resources in those activities. The only motive of that, of putting the resources and yourself even involving in those activity is nothing but to generate profits, and this activity has to run through a cycle. So definitely when you are doing a business, certain fluctuations you may be experiencing during its lifetime. Okay, and these fluctuations can be due to various reasons, macro factors, micro factors, can be reasons for all the fluctuations. Fluctuations is something whereby you're not stable. There are certain changes which are happening which is making you unstable. Changes can be for good, changes can be adverse. Changes for good in the sense because of certain changes happening, your business is doing like exceptionally good, but at times the business also doesn't do well. So we need to study all this thoroughly. So the business cycle has four phases. One is expansion. The expansion happens when this macro factor GDP is increasing. That means there is a lot of positivity in the market. People are eagerly looking forward to spend their money and buy things. No one is having any kind of fear or any kind of threat or any kind of what we say, they are not facing any uncertainties. Before COVID-19 we were seeing this situation. Then comes the peak, that is the real GDP has reached to some point, beyond that it cannot go. So again it starts decreasing. Then comes contraction or recession, real GDP is decreasing. Then comes trough, real GDP stops decreasing and begins increasing. So you can see here the first stage, expansion. So where we see this expansion stage, we are seeing here, and it is reaching a point which is the peak. So it starts expanding, reaches peak, and then it starts decreasing. So here you can see the decreasing aspect. So there is a contraction. There is a point where you see recession, where things are not good for the business because there is no fast movement of the product. Okay, and this is the point which is trough, the least point. Okay, the lowest point in the business cycle. The highest point in the business cycle is the peak, where the business is doing exceptionally well, everything is good for the business. This is the point which is trough due to recession. Recession is a condition whereby people have no confidence whatsoever in their own earnings, in the market. They don't want to spend, they want to save more, and they see that everything is very gloomy and dark in the coming future, and henceforth to save themselves they want to save a lot. Okay, they usually don't go into the market and buy whatever the stuff they want to. They are there's a lot of like thinking which is involved in spending money. So when something is compelling you to think to spend money, that means the market is not doing that well. Okay, and then starts the expansion period. So here is what I explained: peak, highest point; trough, lowest point. Expansion is going upwards towards peak, and contraction is going towards down, that is trough. Okay, let's move forward. So there are alternative ways to show business cycles. The curve in the figure illustrates the classical example, which is based on real GDP relative to a beginning value. The growth cycle refers to changes in the percentage difference between the real GDP and its long-term trend or potential value. So what is that? This is kind of a growth cycle, which is based upon growth cycle refers to changes in the percentage difference between real GDP. That means previously what was the GDP and now what's the GDP, what's the percentage change, and its longer term trend or potential value. That is how the GDP is going to perform. The growth rate cycle refers to changes in annualized percentage. Annualized is nothing but per annum growth rate from one period to next, and ends to show both peaks and troughs earlier than other two measures. Yes. So because this is the stage where things start moving up. This is the stage where the things start going down. So this is the point whereby the expansion is expected or growth is expected. So percentage change can be seen here. This to this. So the growth rate cycle refers to changes in the annualized percentage growth rate from one period to next, and tends to show both peaks and troughs, because peak is the highest point, trough is the lowest point, and here the growth can be seen. The growth rate cycle, which like the growth cycle, shows GDP relative to a trend rate. See, whatever we see a trend, right? Whenever we do a business, we see some trends when the years pass on. Okay, increasing or decreasing is preferred measure for economists and practitioners. So this is the way, this particular graph or curve, whatever you are seeing, is a very good platform to study the direction in which the economy or the business is moving. I would say business rather, because we are studying or reading about the business cycle. So expansion, everything is going good, all the sectors are booming. expansion approaches peak. Then again, changes are happening always. Fluctuation is seen every time, and people start spending more there. Employment is like good when the expansion is happening, but when it reaches peak and then starts decreasing, employment slows, the low, less employment, and then during that period of time, some kind of adverse conditions also crop up. Inflation is accelerating. Why? Because when the economy is expanding, lot of demand for products is seen. People want to buy more and more, and they show excessive demand, and because of that inflation accelerates, right? Contraction is completely vice versa of this. A contraction or recession is associated with declines in most sectors. Things are not doing well, things are going down. We want recovery from that, and economic growth becomes so what happens when contraction reaches a trough? It has reached the least point. Again, there is a, see, we want change, right? We don't want to get restricted to the same point always. So then what government does, it kind of starts preparing policies and strategies how they can make the economy booming. So again, what happens, they try to create demand, and then expansion starts. During COVID-19 it happened, right? Housing sector was down, and they started decreasing interest rates, and that has driven the demand for houses, and people started taking loans at cheaper rates and started buying houses, and the demand in that way was created. Now the houses, now because of excessive buying, what has happened, the prices have gone up. Not only because of that, cost push inflation also has come, has is one of the factors because of the prices going up in various Indian cities after COVID-19 pandemic. Economic growth becomes positive again, and inflation is typically moderate, but employment growth might not start to increase until the expansion has taken hold convincingly. So don't expect everything happening very simply and there and then things changing. It may take some time. It's a time consuming process. Slowly, steadily, the perceptions may build, and slowly, steadily, things may move. So economists commonly consider two consecutive quarters of growth in real GDP, two consecutive, first quarter, second quarter. So always you see the GDP is always the figures related to GDP is given in the quarters, right? First quarter GDP, second quarter GDP. So to be the beginning of an expansion, the two consecutive quarters of declining real GDP to be the beginning of a contraction. So what happens, economics commonly consider two consecutive quarters of growth in real GDP to be the beginning of an expansion. So they see that in 2 quarters, they see whether how the things are moving up or how the things are moving down. So if it's going up, expansion; if it's going down, it is contraction. Statistical agencies who collect stats and data for predicting the expansion and contraction. So statistical agencies that date expansions and recessions, such as National Bureau of Economic Research in US, look at the wider variety of additional economic data. So they also collect a lot of data, not only related to economy, but also related to unemployment, industrial production, inflation, and then they check where the turning points in the business cycle has happened. A key aspect of business cycle is that they recur. It's of recurring nature, right? It's not stopping, it's going on, but not at regular intervals. So past business cycle have been as short as a year or longer than a decade. The idea of a business cycle applies to economies that consist mainly of businesses. For economics that are most subsistent agriculture or dominated by state planning, fluctuations in activity are not really business cycles in the sense we are discussing here. See, what are they saying? Past business cycle have been short, and as short as just 1 year has been considered, or then longer than a decade. So you are seeing a lot of disparities. One is like only one small year, or larger, it seems take 1 decade or 10 years. So idea of a business cycle applies to economies that consist mainly of businesses. So business cycle is only applicable in the countries where the businesses are available. Lot of businesses are operating. For economies, that is, I would say, rather, some like India has moved out of this agri based economy. Now it's into manufacturing and various sectors, service sectors. Africa, if I can take, still they are looking forward to develop themselves. So mostly where agriculture are dominated by state planning. That means state has to intervene a lot and has to start, start running the economy forward towards development. Fluctuations in activity are not really business cycles in those nations. Okay, so this is more of towards the developing economies like India. Credit cycles, same thing comes into picture. Credit cycle is nothing but the point where you have taken loans till the point you have repaid. So refers to cyclical fluctuations in interest rates. So during this stage, interest rates may fluctuate, it may go up, it may go down, loans may become costlier, loans may become cheaper, deposits may become costlier, deposits may become cheaper from the bank's perspective. Typically, like fluctuations in interest rate and availability of loans, lenders are more willing to lend and tend to offer lower interest rates during economic expansions. Yes. And during the expansionary period, what they do is they are also like every sector is very is having confidence because the economy is booming, and they would give the loans at very cheaper rates, and that would again act like a adrenaline, or I would say it will boost the economy in that case, because lower interest rates, cheaper loans, more loans, more loans, more bigger companies, more bigger or expansions, or and more employment, more taxation, economy is booming. Conversely, they are less willing to lend and require higher interest rates when the economy is slowing. That means when the economy is slowing down, they don't want to lend, or they charge higher interest rates because they know things are not going to work out in such kind of scenario. So credit cycles may amplify, that means that may boost up the business cycles, because credit cycle is very important metric to judge the business cycles. If the loans are very cheap, available at cheaper rates, and loans are easily available, that may lead to expansion stage in business cycle. If not, then contraction, right? Business cycles and resource use fluctuation. So what is the next question? Describe how resource use, the resources what you are employing in an activity, business activity. Consumer and business activity, housing sector activity. So they have taken lot many sectors here. They are kind of asking you to describe how the usage of resources, the consumers, the business activities, the housing sector activity, and external trade sector activity vary over business cycle and describe their measurement using economic indicators. So, I already told you business cycle is something in which, lot of other factors are to be considered, and fluctuations in those factors should also be considered, because a market is expanding. So when there is an expansion scene, you see more usage of resources, more consumer buying goods and services, more business activity, housing sector going up, the demand for housing sector picking up, external trade also happening very swiftly and in bulk, and all this leads to the stage of expansion in business cycle, and more employment generation, more taxes for the economy, more inventory, more usage of inventory during these periods. So you see all these things happening, and they are also connected to business cycle. Okay, give me a second, I'll just drink some water and come. 2 minutes. Now, business cycles and resource use fluctuation. See, I would really say when there's an expansion stage, more resources required. When there's a contraction stage, you don't require high usage of resources. The usage of resources may also subside or it will be declining. Okay, so inventories are an important business cycle indicator. So if you want to see that business is expanding, more use of inventory, more raw materials are bought, more production happens. So firms try to keep enough inventory on hand to meet sales demand, but do not want to keep too much of their capital tied up inventory. That is what also a bigger thing to understand. Every business wants enough inventory, but they don't want too much money tied up in inventory. That may make the inventory obsolete in the coming times, and wastage of money. Okay, and if inventory is not fastly moving up, it is it's not good with respect to inventory management. So as a result, inventory sales ratio in many industries tends toward a normal level in times of steady economic growth. So everything is normal during this inventory to sales ratio, how much you bought and how much you sold. So when expansion is approaching its peak, sales growth begins to slow because it has reached its peak, right? Now there's no scope of going up. So now it has to go down and unsold inventories accumulate. This can be seen as an increase in inventory sales ratio above its normal level. So inventory at the highest levels, you have the highest level of inventory holding right now and highest level of sales you are doing right now. Then firms respond to this unplanned increase in inventory by reducing production. So now what, since the inventory is intact in the market, the firms start producing less. There's no use, right? No one is going to buy now until unless that is sold. The inventory held up is sold, which is one of the causes of subsequent contraction in economy. That means now the things go down. So an increase in inventory is counted up in GDP statistics as economic output, whether the increase is planned or unplanned. An analyst who looks only at GDP growth rather than inventory sales ratio might see economic strength rather than beginning of weakness. Yes. So being an analyst, you are going to, if you crack the exam, you become an analyst, you are not only going to see the GDP growth, you are going to see the inventory sales ratio as well. GDP growth may show the economic strength, but a very high inventory sales ratio may show that in the future, as the inventory is very much tied up, held up, and a lot of sales they have to do right now, in the future, they are not going to expect higher sales because things are going to go down, or now they are going into the decline stage. Okay. So increase in inventory is counted in the GDP statistics. So the ones who are collecting data regarding the GDP, they see this as a good sign. Okay, whether there's a planned or unplanned production happening. But analyst who looks only at this, only one factor, and not considering this factor, might see economic strength. Yes, as with respect to this factor, but they don't see the beginning of weakness. Now, opposite occurs when contraction reaches its trough. Now things are not going good in the economy. So having reduced their production levels to adjust for lower sales demand. So they reduce their production levels to very lower levels, and because the sales demand is not that high, firms find their inventories becoming depleted more quickly once sales growth begins to accelerate. So when less has been produced because of less demand, less inventory is there in the market, but now things are going to get accelerated. So that inventory which is right now there will finish in fraction of time. So this causes the inventory sales ratio to decrease because below its normal level, because now the inventory is not available and the sales is also not happening. Okay, because now things are going to accelerate. That's what, having reduced their production levels to adjust for lower sales demand, firms find their inventories becoming depleted more quickly once sales growth begins to accelerate. Before that, we are just discussing this point. So inventory sales ratio, so less inventory, less sales, it goes at very lower levels, because now as the growth, the growth is going to pick up, they don't have the inventory and also they cannot sell. So it has gone to very lowest level. So to meet the increase in demand, firms will increase output and inventory sales ratio will increase back towards normal level. So after going to the least level, because the production hasn't happened properly, The inventory wasn't there in the market to that extent to cater the needs of the to cater the demand of the customers. So whatever was available, they sold it. Now they are not having much of inventory. Now to change this scenario, the production has to go up, or the production has to there should be increase in output now. So which will lead to again the inventory sales ratio going up. So one of the ways that firms react to fluctuations in business activities by adjusting their use of labor and physical capital. See, they act accordingly. When there is high demand, they produce more. When there is less demand, they produce less. They add up the resources, they decrease the resources. That's what we were discussing here. We are discussing about this only right now, about the resource use fluctuation. So more demand, more labor, more capital, less demand, less labor, less capital. Expansionary stage, more labor, more demand, more capital. Contraction stage, vice versa. Similarly, because it is costly to adjust production levels by frequently buying and selling plant and equipment, firms first adjust their production levels by using their existing physical capital. So they don't go for expansion like that. First, they see what capacity they have, and whether with the capacity what they have, they can fulfill the needs. If not, then they will look forward for expansion and meeting the demand of the customers. And then they start investing more in plant and equipment. During contractions, however, firms will not necessarily sell plant and equipment outright. See, contraction is nothing but that stage where the things are not going well. But the firms will not sell their plant and machinery or equipment and stop production. They will not do that. Okay. They can reduce their physical capacity by spending less on maintenance or by delaying the replacement of equipment that is nearing the end of its useful life. Some changes they may do, but not certain changes which are something like which may end up the activity, the business activity for them. They're not going to do that. Next. Consumer sector activity. So we have consumer sector activity and housing sector activity and external trade sector activity. These are the ones which we have to discuss. See, consumer sector activity, consumer spending, the largest component of GDP, depends on the levels of consumers' current incomes and their expectations about their future incomes. As a result, consumer spending increases during expansion and decreases during contractions. Consumer spending in some sectors is more sensitive to business cycle phases than spending in other sectors. Spending on durable goods is highly cyclical because they are often high value purchases. Yes, because once you buy a washing machine, then you buy after 5 years only, not immediately, right? Durable goods, perishable goods you buy very often. So during the expansionary times, durable goods, not much of changes or fluctuations are seen. So consumer spending in some sectors is more sensitive to business cycle phases than spending in other sectors. Spending on durable goods is highly cyclical because they are often high value purchases. Consumers are more willing to purchase high durable goods, example appliances, furniture, automobiles during expansions. I'm not saying that the people will buy only during good times, not at bad times. But the durable goods are very costly and can be used for a very long period of time. But still, we see only the high sales of these durable goods during expansionary times because the income levels are high and they don't mind buying them. Okay, because their confidence is also very high. During contractions, vice versa. So consumer spending on services is also positively correlated with business cycle phases. That means during expansion they buy more, during contraction they buy less. They travel more, they go to restaurants more because they're confident. They buy, and also including spending that is less discretionary. Some things they cannot avoid, right? Telecommunications, healthcare, insurance, they have to buy. But during good times, they also don't compromise on this. There are many people, during when they don't have jobs or employment levels are less, they're struggling, they won't take insurance. They will try to, skip these payments and get rid of this. But during expansionary times, even these sectors also boom. Spending on non-durable goods such as food, these are all everyday usage things, so doesn't have that much business cycle doesn't impact that much spending or non-spending on all these goods. So they are relatively more stable. during the business cycle stages. Now, housing sector activity, I will really tell you, when the economy is booming, people buy more houses, right? Because there are some determinants which will decide the economic activity, level of economic activity in housing sector. Mortgage rates, low rates may drive up the demand, less rates may decrease the demand, and low rates are seen during expansion stages. Housing cost relative to income, if in good economy, expansion stage, everyone is employed, they get really well paid, okay, hence that can increase the demand for the housing, and so like they may buy more. So when incomes are cyclically low, high during like expansionary times, or low during contraction times. Relative to home costs, including mortgage finance costs, home buying and construction tend to increase. When it is high, it increases; when it is low, it decreases. Housing activity can decrease even when incomes are rising, if housing prices are rising faster than incomes, as often occurs late in the expansions. Yes, now in Hyderabad the condition is same. People's incomes, like housing activity is decreasing. People don't want to buy houses right now. Why? Even though their income levels are rising, but the housing cost is right. The jump in the housing cost is of 25%, let's say, and the jump in the income is of 5%, let's say. So now what will happen? Despite of jump, you're not willing to buy the houses because the prices are very, very high, and this is at the late expansionary stage. More speculative activity, more people will be buying the apartments and keeping it, and then they want to sell it when the prices are going up. That happens. And also demographic factors, more youth in the country, more housing sales. Less youth, less sales. Why? Because older people don't want to buy houses much often. I've seen that, because the pensioners and all, they want a decent life, but they don't want that extra or additional burden. Okay, and they want to shift to rural areas as well rather than cities. So proportion of population in 25 to 40-year-old segment is possibly related to activity in housing sector, because these are the ages of greatest household formation. Yes, if people buy, see, I am telling you very clearly, study well, crack the exams, get a good job, you will be in this category. Many people will buy in this age time. Once 40, you cross 40, then like you may try your level best to buy, but very tough to buy. Okay, because many things would not support you during those times. This is what I'm just kind of I have seen this trend. There can be trend breakers as well. So like strong population shift from rural areas to cities may drive up the housing like activity, but if they go into rural areas from urban areas, then less of the housing activity. Okay, so young people, they come to cities during this age time and they buy. I have not seen the trend in the old people. They want to move out of the cities. So strong population shift from rural areas to cities, as may occur in newly industrializing economies like India, may require large increases in construction of new housing to accommodate those needs. That's the reason why cities turning into concrete jungle right now. External trade sector activity. The most important factors determining the level of countries' imports and exports are domestic GDP growth, GDP growth of trading partners, and currency exchange rates. Increasing growth in domestic GDP leads to increase in purchase of foreign goods. Yes, if the GDP is rising. So if the GDP is rising, it leads to increase in purchase of foreign goods, because people are, like they are earning more. More people going to Europe for trips from India because they're earning more. Okay, growth in GDP shows that. Decreasing GDP reduces imports. Exports depend on growth rates of GDP of other economies, especially those of important trading partners. Increasing foreign incomes, increase sales to foreigners, exports, and decreasing economic growth in foreign countries decreases domestic exports. That's what. So if the foreign country people whom you are selling goods are earning more, they will buy more from you. That will increase your exports. If not, then less exports. Increase in value of country's currency. If India's rupee is appreciating, the goods of Indian goods will be expensive to foreign buyers, so less exports. If India's If rupee is appreciating, less exports. If rupee is depreciating, more exports. If dollar is appreciating, less imports. If dollar is depreciating, more imports, right? And this is also one of the factors. Currency effects on imports and exports can differ in direction from GDP growth effects and respond to complex set of variables. The factors of the effects of changes in GDP levels and growth rates are more direct and immediate. Typically, business cycle characteristics may be summarized as follows. Trough: GDP growth rate changes from negative to positive. That's the stage whereby the least has been, we are at the lowest stage. We won't go below that. So we will start moving up now. Already we have discussed. High unemployment rate and an increasing use of overtime and temporary workers. Spending on consumer durable goods and housing may start increasing. There's a moderate or decreasing inflation rate during troughs. Because inflation would be less that time because less demand, right? GDP is high, unemployment rate decreases as hiring accelerates. There are investment increases in producers, equipment, and home construction. Inflation may increase because of more demand. Imports increase as domestic income growth accelerates. Because more imports are happening now. People are earning more. They want more foreign goods. Peak. You have reached the highest rate. Now the GDP will decrease. Unemployment rate will decrease, but hiring slows. Okay, consumer spending and business investments grow at slower rates now onwards. Inflation rate increases because you're at the highest stage. Contraction, vice versa of this. GDP growth is negative because the economy is not growing. Hours work decrease, unemployment rate increase, consumer spending, home construction, and business investments decrease. Inflation rate decrease with a lag. Imports decrease as domestic income growth slows, because if the income is less, you will not import more goods, right? Economic indicators. GDP was one of the economic indicators. So economic indicators can be classified into three categories. Leading indicators. GDP is high, it would lead to good growth in the economy. So peaks. So that have been known to change direction before peaks or troughs in the business cycle. Okay. Leading. So leading is like, you reach, you are at the trough. You're at the trough. Now you start seeing a growth, right? Expansion, and you reach the peak because of leading indicators. Coincident indicators that change direction at roughly the same time as peaks or troughs. That means coincident. That means the changes are happening at the same time. From the peak, the fall is happening, and from the trough, the growth is happening. So both are happening at the same time. Lagging, that tend not change until change direction until after expansions or contractions are already underway. So when these things are happening now, the movement is already there. So lagging indicator that does not that tend not to change direction until after this and this are already underway. That means if these stages are seen, then the movement may happen. Okay, otherwise it will lag, go behind. So this is the end of the business cycle chapter. I wanted to go through this chapter thoroughly. Tomorrow we will take long lived assets. Okay, any doubts you can bring to my notice. Thank you.